God on the Move.
So at these fairs, there will be different booths where someone will offer to read your palm, for instance, and tell you something about who you are and what has shaped you. There will be divination, for instance, through tarot cards or other means like that. Someone will read your aura, which is sort of your spiritual snapshot of your spirit, meaning how are you doing, what is your spiritual temperature.
Despite the ever-increasing secularization of the Western society, the Barna Group has found out that younger generations are spiritually hungry. Denmark is known for its Viking history, or maybe among the postmodern listeners for hygge, the famous Danish lifestyle of coziness and comfortable conviviality that engenders a feeling of contentment and well-being. But it's certainly not known for spirituality, is it? You are listening to God on the Move, a Lausanne Movement podcast, and this is a story of a spiritual awakening in the cold of Denmark. The voice you heard earlier is Thomas Frovin. He's the pastor of a Lutheran congregation in Copenhagen, and this is his story.
My name is Thomas Frovin. I'm 47 and I'm married and I have 2 adult kids. I am a pastor in the center of Copenhagen in a Lutheran church here. We are in an area of Copenhagen that historically has been influenced a lot by poverty, and there is still a lot of homelessness. We have many refugees in the church where I'm a pastor. So every day I am meeting with people who come from a different life circumstance than myself. And I guess that this, in a way, part of the story God is weaving with my life. I've had the privilege of often finding myself in situations and places that weren't my own, but that I got to become a part of and got immersed in. Me and my family have served as cross-cultural missionaries in Albania and Peru. And then for the past, 15, 18 years, I have been involved in trying to bridge the gap between the church and its theology, our spirituality, and then the people in our society. The growing number of people, I would say, that I would call spiritually curious. So here in Denmark, there is I would say a growing number of people who discover in themselves a spiritual longing, or they have experiences in their life that makes sense most in a spiritual way, and they are looking for places to find an understanding of what it means for their lives. And for me, it's important that we as a church are where people are, where the conversations about the important things in life are taking place, that we as Christians should be there, participate in the conversation, and then tell about our Lord and Savior.
Many of our listeners probably don't know an awful lot about Denmark, much less about the state of the church and the spiritual climate of the country. So, of course, I had to ask Thomas to enlighten us.
So I'm a Lutheran and I'm part of the Lutheran Evangelical Church here, and it has grown from being a sort of groundbreaking, revolutionary church that really wanted to take back the gospel in its radical form, setting people free to love Jesus and love their neighbor. It has grown from that into a very traditional church, which I guess is a danger that there are for all church societies. And there are many issues with the Lutheran tradition that I even have myself. In Denmark, this is the tools that God is still using, I would say, the church. The church in Denmark is many things. The Lutheran form of expression takes many forms. So there is a strain in the Lutheran church in Denmark that is absolutely in line with, I would say, contemporary evangelicalism. And there are parts of Lutheranism here that isn't. For me, it's important to remember Jesus' words to the Pharisees. Always, no matter what church we belong to, we can easily grow into our customs and thought and our theological battles that we fought so hard for, that we become cold-hearted, or our hearts become hard. And that can make it difficult for us to listen to the simple but difficult truths that the Bible speaks to us. So we should always strive to do that. So yeah, the Lutheran Church here is many things. Pray for us. We need it. I guess that the spiritual climate in Denmark is as it is in many Western European nations, meaning that we have a very rich Christian heritage. The church has been strong here for centuries. In Denmark, the church was reformed in the tradition of Martin Luther. So this meant that 500 years ago, there was a change happening. The word of the Bible were sort of being given freely to people, and it sparked a lot of revival in the church. But you can say that what we would need or long for is a fresh visitation from the Spirit. Many Danes uphold a relationship to the church in a membership sort of way, meaning that they will gladly come for service at Christmas, and the framework of the church for baptism and for funerals makes sense for a lot of people. But I would say that the church has in many ways failed in preaching about what it means to be a follower of Christ. So many people doesn't have this concept of what it means to have faith. Ever since World War II, the theological conversations in Denmark has downplayed the role of faith in the life of people. And what is happening now is that people are discovering that there is an aspect of life that can not only just be explained in scientific terms. So they are discovering the Bible teaches about us as humans, the components that we consist of, that we are body, we are soul, but that we are also spiritual beings. And when you encounter this in yourself, it can be surprising and frustrating and fantastic and devastating in many ways. But for many people, it leads them to ask questions about their lives and what should happen now. And in many ways, sadly, the church is not always the first thing that comes in mind when people have these experiences or discoveries within themselves. I think that in many ways, we as church has failed being a accountable testimony of God in Denmark. There are people who do not consider the church being a place of spirit, but more a very old institutions like a museum. We maintain some own dogmas and we do our things, but the thriving, living example of spirit-filled Christian is probably not what comes to mind when people here reflect on how they view the church. So what happens when people discover in themselves that they are spiritual beings is that they will often look to other traditions outside of the church that seems more spiritual. And that means that they will find this underground of spiritual groups and people that have sort of sprung up over the past 30, 40 years in Denmark. And I think it is prevalent in many Western countries. In many ways, it can be interpreted as old beliefs coming back, like pre-Christian beliefs. But for me, it is important to not consider it as more, but an expression of a longing for meaning and of wholeness, an expression that I share myself, and an expression that I believe as a Christian and as a pastor is something that only can be fulfilled in Christ. And so for me, it is important that we as a church dare to be in this field where many people who are super interested in spiritual practices that are not Christians, where they are, it's like a marketplace. I believe that we as a church should be there, should point to our old spiritual practices of prayer, for instance, to bring a responsible testimony about God and God's care for all people. So I would say that the climate here is growing from, there is such a curiosity and openness towards spirituality that I have never seen in my lifetime. Every 10 years or so, there is a survey done about the values of the Danes, like how do we evolve politically, ethically, and so on. And in the latest edition, the people behind this survey, who are among some of the finest scientists in Denmark, their estimation was that 24% of Danes are what they labeled as alternative believers in God. And by this, they would say that they have a belief in some sort of deity. It is not necessarily a deity that aligns with sort of classically biblical or Islamic beliefs about who God is, but the idea of there being some sort of God is there with people. And then they say that 11% of Danes are, in their words, are spiritual, meaning that they are involved in spiritual practices, divination, the laying of tarot cards, the reading of palms, whatever. It can take many forms. So that means that 35% of Danes are reflecting on spiritual questions. And for me, this number is big. It is also surprising, but it is also an opportunity for the church to say, okay, if 35% of Danes are engaging with thinking about spiritual questions, then we as a church absolutely should be there and present ourselves as a good partner to team up with, to have these conversations with. It is in many ways a tired church, but also with a very curious people. And we are entering something new that I think we as a church should be very considerate of and very grateful to God for, because it does give us an opportunity to talk about important things with people. That is a lot of people. And I would say that Danes, we're not very upfront about things. There is sort of an irony or sarcasm in the way we talk about things, meaning that also sometimes makes it difficult to talk about things that deal with faith, because there is a general idea that if you are a believer of any sort, you are taking yourself very seriously. And that is probably the main sin for a Dane, is to take yourself too seriously. But for me, what has been so interesting to discover is that even though these questions about faith and spirituality has been neglected or laughed upon, they're still happening inside of people. And I believe that the Spirit is there and trying to use this curiosity and these questions. And so we as a church should be there as well.
In case you're wondering, we're talking about nearly 2 million people that are reflecting on spiritual questions. But spiritually open, of course, doesn't mean that there's a huge pilgrimage of people coming to the church and looking for answers. I certainly wasn't expecting to hear that, but I also wasn't expecting to hear what's really going on.
What happens, I would say, is that the spirituality that is running around here is not very dogmatic, which means that people are open to combine different things from different traditions. So there may be ideas of, say, reincarnation, that you would say, oh, this grows from a Hindu tradition or something like that. How can you mix that up with, say, a shamanistic approach to nature, an understanding of man's place in nature? How can you combine these things? But this is what is happening. So the spirituality is very democratic as it runs about, and it's very anarchistic. And I would say that people are building beliefs that are a collage of things. You may have Buddha there. You may also have Jesus there. So it's not exclusive. But there are also some old beliefs, pre-Christian beliefs, that are blending into this. I think that all of this is an expression of the truth that the Bible speaks, that I was referring to before, that we are spiritual beings. And when we recognize this in ourselves, we can quite easily become religious, because we sense that there is more to life and we need to do something about it. So with our hands, we construct artifacts or build rituals that can comfort us and guide us. And it turns into religion. Of course, what Jesus calls us to is a relationship with the living God, which is different from a practice where you have to do something to please the deity or to make things happen. There's an organic quality to the relationship with Jesus that I do not always detect in other spiritual practices that can seem quite focused on getting a result out of doing something. If you do this, if you eat this, if you use this, if you take this course, this will happen. But I think it is an expression of the deeply rooted spirituality in us that will, as Augustine says, it will not be calm until it rests in God. What I have been involved with, a ministry that I've been working with here for a number of years, is that we have in Denmark fairs. Like we will have a book fair, or a lot of people will come and sell you stuff in a big hall somewhere. They will sell all their books or whatever it is. We will have fairs that are called Body, Mind, Spirit, or health fairs, or even alternative fairs. I don't enjoy the word alternative a lot, because it tends to distance itself from people. If you say that about someone that they are alternative, that's a judgy character that I don't appreciate. But anyway, sometimes they are called alternative fairs, these fairs. So at these fairs, there will be different booths where someone will offer to read your palm, for instance, and tell you something about who you are and what has shaped you. There will be divination, for instance, through tarot cards or other means like that. Someone will read your aura, which is sort of your spiritual snapshot of your spirit, meaning how are you doing? What is your spiritual temperature? There are, of course, book sales and things that are more health-wise, creams and diets. And there's also people who will offer that they can come in contact with your deceased loved ones if you have unfinished business with them. So there are a number of things there that you can do. And these are quite well visited in Denmark, these fairs. So we have been going there as Christians with a booth, and what we offer is to pray with people. It's quite simple. We will offer to pray with people. And then some people will ask, so what is this? And we will say we're Christians. We believe Jesus is here, and we believe that we can pray to him about anything that is on our mind. We can bring to him our joys and our worries. And often what happens is that people will start telling us things about their lives. They just met us, but they will be very open with us about things that they are struggling with. And so it takes place just like you've seen in every other church in the world. We will say, okay, let's sit down and can I put my hand upon your shoulder when I pray for you? Very, very simple. And then we'll just pray. We will give it some time. We will not be busy. For many people, this is a new experience. And many of the people that come to these fairs, they have a sort of a spiritual sense of things. We've been praying for each other and for the fair before we started, so we trust that the Spirit is there and will touch people, and he does. So often when we are done praying, also discerning if there are anything God leads us to pray for with this person sitting there. But often when we're done, we'll ask them, so how was this experience for you? Are you okay? And there will be people who have had a very deep experience there of God's love and the presence of Jesus. Someone has seen Jesus standing there as we were praying. Some has maybe sometimes sensed that there were things happening inside of them in their hearts. Some will have a sense that what we prayed for was prophetic. This is probably not the word that they will use, but that we were praying into a situation where the words felt that they brought with them truth and light. And then some will be like, well, how did you do this? What did you do? And then we sort of downplay ourselves and we'll say, oh, well, we're just regular people, we just pray. You heard us. We don't have any tricks up our sleeves, but we believed, as we said, that Jesus is here. So if you have had a sense that he has touched you or met you, what do you think that is about? So often that would be a conversation about what are the intentions of Jesus and what was experience for. And then often we will invite them to a local fellowship, a church or a Christian group, or an activity maybe somewhere that will be a bridge into the church and that will be Christ-centered. And often it is sadly quite difficult for people to take that walk, to walk that bridge into the church. And I have to say, sadly, in many places, it's also difficult for the church to accept these people when they turn up, because their life experience and the whole language that they have about their spirituality and their longing, the experiences that they've had, the places that they've been, maybe, for many Christians sounds very foreign, if not even dangerous or wrong. And they will not be afraid of saying that to this new person who just turned up, that he or she is wrong. And you don't like to come to a new place and feel unwelcome. And this is often what happens. So part of this ministry has also been trying to encourage the church to have an openness toward people who come to listen to them and to try to listen into how has God touched upon them earlier? How can we see God's care for them and compassion for them through their lives when they tell us about what they've experienced? Because this is also, and this has probably been one of the biggest discoveries for me. I guess in the beginning, when I was quite young and I went to these fairs to pray with people, I had the sense that I was bringing Jesus there. And then to discover that so often, also when we prayed with people, they would be reminded of, oh, my grandmother, she also prayed for me. Or I've met Jesus before. This reminds me of this one time. So for me, the discovery of how God very steadily is trying to reach out to communicate his love to people has been just wonderful to discover. And it gives me hope, because if he's not done with some person I just met, then he's also not done with me.
What a wonderful reminder of that beautiful revelation. God is not done with me yet. It reminds me of the famous verse from Lamentations 3:19-23. I remember my afflictions and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Oh, great is your faithfulness. Before we continue with the story, I want to let you know that we want to share mission stories from the Global Church with the Global Church. So if you have a story to share or know someone who might have, please contact us at podcast@lausanne.org. That is podcast@lausanne.org. At this point in our conversation, I started wondering how someone gets into this kind of ministry and if Thomas had previous affiliations with this sector. I don't know about you, but can you hear the love and the passion in his voice as he dives deeper into this topic?
So my own story with this, I got sort of a missionary calling when I was quite young. And I think that God used it to call me into fields that weren't my own, as I said. So I've always been drawn to the outskirts of the church, the things hiding in the shadows or the people hiding there. And then that has shown itself in my life in many ways that I will not bother you with that now. But this ministry, when I discovered it, it touched upon a deeply missional longing in me that, wow, it was a field that nobody was touching upon just in my own country. And it was a field that many considered dangerous in the church. To go into this was dangerous. It was, enemy turf. So naturally, I was drawn to it and I had to check it out. And I think what I discovered was that we don't talk about mass conversions here. It's pretty much an Areopagus kind of ministry where Paul is standing looking at all of these altars, and in Acts it said that he got saddened by seeing the spiritual practices there. But instead of condemning it, he went to this altar for an unknown God that they have raised just to make sure. And then he said, okay, let me tell you about this God. And then he, instead of saying, I have brought the real God here, me and the real God, we are together. What he's saying is this God, the real God, was here before I came. And he has touched upon your lives in many ways. And then he quotes poets that they knew as an expression of the truth that had been there before he even came to point it out. And in scripture, many times it is pointed out that a person who turns up from another people group or tradition was God-fearing. He or she was God-fearing. It's being pointed out that somehow here are people that didn't have a Jewish background, but still had the right approach to God. I think that was what I discovered as well going into this ministry, that Jesus doesn't exclusively work within the confinements of the church's four walls. This is so basic. We know this. But I think that for many of us who grew up evangelic, it's easier to grasp when we talk about people in a foreign land than we talk about our own country, men and women who are involved with spiritual practices that we consider very wrong. How can Jesus be there? Here, he must exclusively be with us. We're his people. And this is where we sometimes need to really consider how we think about the presence of the Spirit in our world. And we need to think about the patience with which God is working in our world. So we know that Paul thought that he would be seeing the return of Jesus. It was just around the corner. And it's been a couple of thousand of years. So if anything, this is a testimony to God's patience with us. But we so often does not extend that same patience neither to ourselves or to people around us, because we feel that we need to hear certain things being said the right way, or we feel we need to see certain expressions of faith in the right way. Why? Because that will make us feel secure. But we are not called into security. The only security we can get is trusting our lives in Jesus' hands. And you can say sharing the gospel in that way is sort of messy. We are called to share it, but we cannot control how it is being received or what people will do with what we come. And it's on my heart sometimes to make the church consider how it welcomes people, that in the words that they use and in the life experience that they have will never sound like themselves, will never have had the same schooling, will never approach Jesus in the same way, but will express a faith in their own way. And then trusting that if we walk together and if we walk towards Jesus with people, then the Spirit will do his job. I believe that the church should be a place where we preach, we go through the catechism or whatever important stuff we had. This is the work of the church. This is also part of our spirituality, that we shouldn't stay as spiritual children, but we should grow into being able to eat solid foods and so on. So that is the work of the Spirit. But is this a work that should exclude? Are we doing it to exclude some people, or are we doing it to get closer to Jesus? And for me, there is a line there that sometimes is being crossed, where we use our preaching and teaching to draw a line where we can point to some people that they are out, they're on the wrong side of this line, instead of seeing this as a means that should draw us all closer to Jesus. Even the one that smells funny or has a strange story or comes with also a spiritual baggage that it will take some time to put away, or it will take some discovery to come to the realization that maybe I no longer need this belief that I hold on to for years, because Jesus will give me something that is more real and more true. It takes time to discover this, and that demands patience of us. I have been very encouraged here by seeing Danish celebrities confess a faith in Jesus. And some of them has come to Jesus through very surprising means. So, for instance, probably the most famous stand-up comedian and director and actor that we have here, he started taking drugs to enhance his imagination. And through this, he discovered his own spirit, you can say. And thank God he met someone who brought him to a pastor who wasn't being judgmental of this, saying that this is not the right way to come to Jesus, but who sort of say, okay, let's talk about Jesus. And he was, as an adult, baptized. And I think he is a part of a church here. He has his own podcast where he invites other stand-up comedians, politicians, different people, and he quite openly talks about Jesus in this podcast. He doesn't sound like a pastor, and I hope he never will. And sometimes he will say some things where you sort of think, well, theologically, I don't know. But you cannot deny the honesty of his faith and the change that it has brought in his life, which he also talks about. When you hear such a story, I think we are called to rejoice. We are also called to say, okay, there are so many strange ways that Jesus can reveal himself to people. There is one Jesus being that he has so many means of getting to people. And I think that instead of counting people out who we feel have had the wrong path, we should be open to educating ourselves on how the presence of the Spirit works in our world. So, for instance, I can pray with people sometimes and they will say that they've seen Jesus or they've met Jesus before. And then someone will ask, how do you know it's the right Jesus? And I would say, well, I don't know. I have not had the experience that they have had, but they have recognized us praying together to Jesus with the Jesus experience that they've had before. And if maybe it's not too interesting to diagnose what happened then, maybe the interesting thing is here that this gives me an opportunity to talk more about Jesus. And this gives this person an openness towards Jesus because he or she gets the sense that this Jesus character wants something to do with me. I think that sometimes we get too focused on diagnosing what's going on here, what happened here, how can you explain this? Instead of just saying, okay, we will give this experience to God and ask, what can you make use of this? How can this serve your kingdom? And again, that demands patience. So my advice to the church is, just like God is patient with each one of us, and he is patient with our world, we should practice and expand that patience to each other. And we should trust God's guidance in our own lives and in the lives of other people. This is not easy, but I do believe it's the way to go.
At this point, we started talking about how, with a little bit of grace, we can see people of other faiths or those who are experimenting with various spiritualities and practices as more than heretics or unbelievers, when actually these people are probably not that much different from us. We're all searching for truth. The only difference is that we have already been found by Jesus, the way, the truth, and the life. But other people are still on their journey of seeking truth.
To get to that place where you discover, I cannot in myself find the truth or what will give me peace or what will reconcile me with the things in the world that I do not understand or that hurts me. When you get to that realization, that very painful, difficult realization that I cannot in myself get to that point, I need someone or something outside of me to bring that to me. This is such an opening. I mean, this is the landing field of the Spirit. And this is why it excites me to discover this spiritual curiosity in the Western world. That we can easily lament and cry about how the church is falling apart in the Western world. And part of that is, which is another topic, part of that is because of the church itself. But over the years, there has been such a sense of you should engage, you should believe in your truth. You're responsible for your own life. You had nobody to thank but yourself. You have to believe in yourself. And now people are discovering that this was a lie. This was a heresy. The truth, I need someone to bring me. If this is not an opening for the Spirit, I don't know what it is. And so, because there are people in the church who will cry about, oh, it's terrible with all the tarot cards and all this heathen practices, and this is just awful. And of course, every lie is awful. I mean, every lie is awful. But here there is also an openness for the Spirit that is surprising. And there is a room for God to act in and to show himself to people. And he will do that. Of course he will. He is doing that. And who are we as a church to say that, no, we will not deal with these people and we will not go there because they believe wrong?
As always, there's a whole lot that probably should be said, and even more that could be said. Our heart here is to burst some of our bubbles that we are caught in because of our own contexts and open a new vista, even if just a little bit, without revealing the whole picture. To wrap things up, I wanted to know what we, ordinary Christians, you and I, can learn from this and what each of us can do. So let's hear from Thomas one last time.
I've painted a picture of the landscape in Denmark, and I'm aware that this might look very different in other countries, this sort of spiritual landscape, and people might see it differently than I do. I do, however, think that there is, in many countries in Europe, a growing sense of spiritual questions arising outside of the church. The church no longer has the monopoly of these things. So what does that mean for us who are in the church? Well, I think, first of all, we need to pray. This is always the first thing we need to do. We need to pray to God about this. We need to tell God what we see and how it affects us, whether we feel that it comes with opportunities for the church or whether we are saddened by what we see. We need to involve God in what it is doing to us. And I would say that the next step is to remember that these are people who are on their way, just like we are on our way. They do not represent a system, even though we might feel that they do. They are still, regular people who live and breathe and who want good things for their families and a meaningful life, and who get saddened when they get ill or when relationships are broken, just like every other person. And this means that our compassion and care for them should be just like for any other person. But there might be a difference here, and that is that for people who have discovered their own sort of spiritual curiosity, it might actually be nice if someone asked them if they could pray for them or with them. And they might be open to that in a sense that other people, because they themselves have recognized within them a longing for truth and beauty and peace. And this is a very simple step to take that we maybe sometimes, at least here, do not take because we think that, to pray for someone is something extra out of the ordinary. But it's a very simple step to do. So if you have people around you and they tell you about something they have been involved with or a spiritual practice they have or a belief they have, instead of thinking, this lights up a lot of red lights in my mind and I need to correct them or I need to tell them how wrong they are, maybe there is a place we can meet, and this is inviting them into a prayer and then together addressing Jesus and letting him do the rough work for us. I think that's a good first step to take for ourselves and for the people that we care about around us. And then my experience is that then it's also easier to have the conversations later about who this Jesus is, what kind of Jesus it is we talk about in the church, and maybe getting to read scriptures a bit.
You've listened to God on the Move, a Lausanne Movement podcast, where we want to listen to mission stories from the global church. Through listening to what God is doing around the world, we hope to encourage and challenge the global church to faithful obedience to the Great Commission. So let's accelerate global mission together toward a vision for the gospel for every person, disciple-making churches for every people and place, Christ-like leaders in every church and sector, and kingdom impact in every sphere of society. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, be sure to subscribe and follow us for more.